Welcome to All Horse Racing All the Time. I'm your host, Al. In this video, we're going to be talking Bob Baffert. 2023 Kentucky Derby, just over 2 weeks away. If you're a horse racing fan, you got to be living under a rock if you don't realize or don't know about Bob Baffert still being suspended from the Kentucky Derby. He was suspended for the 2022 Kentucky Derby and now the 2023. And how do you feel about Bob Baffert? Is Bob Baffert bad for horse racing? You know, the suspension went down after his Kentucky Derby winner, Medina Spirit, tested positive for his substance. Medina Spirit did win the Kentucky Derby, and then he got banned, put in exile for a couple of years. Now, is he bad for horse racing, Bob? You hear some people are adamant about that. They say that Bob Baffert is a detriment to the sport of kings. But is he really? I'm going to be taking a look at that here in this video. And even if, whether you're for Bob or against Bob, I'm going to break some things down. And maybe by the end of this video, maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you have the same opinion. But you may be surprised by the time we're done looking at this here today. I mean, what's the Kentucky Derby without Bob? The sunglasses, the hair, the flamboyant trainer, winning trainer, and the winning, most importantly, the winning of the Kentucky Derby. Now, with the suspension, he would have broke the record for Kentucky Derby victories if Medina Spirit stood up, but he stands tied for the most Kentucky Derby wins with 6, and a couple of Triple Crown winners in American Pharaoh and Justify. How can a guy like that be bad for horse racing? Well, we're going to take a look at that here. But it's certainly a different feel without Bob Baffert at the Kentucky Derby, whether he's there, whether he's not. Now, this is going to be the second year in a row that he's not there. Let's face it, the ghost of Bob is going to be present everywhere, circulating around the Kentucky Derby, whether he's there or not. How can it not be? If you ask people, maybe here in America, name a horse trainer. Just give me a horse trainer off the top of your head. Well, everyone's going to say, most people, I believe, would say Bob Baffert. What do you think? Now, if you ask people around the world, of course, you probably get a different opinion. In the UK, you probably hear Charlie Appleby, but I'm talking America here, and maybe even in the UK. What do you think? If any of you for a UK or somewhere else, who do you think? Bob Baffert? I did put a survey out there yesterday because I knew that I'd be covering this in a video, and just to get a snapshot of if people think Bob Baffert is bad for horse racing or if he's not. And I'll put a link to that survey. It's actually a poll down below in the description area, so you can weigh in yourself. But let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at Bob. And there was an article the other day, about a week ago, and I'm going to go through this article, and it's an excellent article. I'm going to cover it from start to finish, and I'm going to weigh in on this article at different points. We'll take you through it. It's a tremendous article. It's informative. So I think you might find this rather interesting. And I'm going to bring that up right now, and then we'll weigh in on this, and let's see how we feel about Bob, whether he's good for horse racing or bad for horse racing. Either way, I'm sure a lot of horse fans, have an opinion on this. And the name of the article is, Even in Exile, Bob Baffert is the king of the sport of kings. And now this appeared in the New York Times on April 11th. So that's 9 days ago, and it's by writer Joe Drape. So I'm not going to just go, I'm going to go through this article, give you I'll weigh in on different points. And it's an interesting story, and maybe you'll have a different opinion about Bob. Maybe you're for Bob, and then you turn around and you are against him by the time this article, we get through this, or vice versa. Opinions vary. Now, I told you I put a poll out there yesterday. Opinions vary about this, but do they vary that much? You may be surprised. And even in exile, Bob Baffert is the king of the sport of kings. And now we begin the article. Baffert was barred from Triple Crown races after Medina Spirit tested positive for a prohibited drug at the 2021 Kentucky Derby. But owners keep sending him expensive horses and he keeps winning. Owners are choosing this guy. The suits, the hair, whatever. Bottom line there, he keeps winning and owners keep sending him expensive horses. Now, there are different trainers out there they could send expensive horses to. Why do they keep sending them to Bob? Because he knows how to get the job done. And we go on. As exiles go, Bob Baffert has been a comfortable one. Most mornings, the horse trainer who is barred from competing in the Kentucky Derby can be found beneath the rouge-tipped San Gabriel Mountains, holding court at Clocker's Corner, the open-air bistro at Santa Anita Park. So he's over there at the park, and he's holding court. He sounds like he's very sociable, charismatic character as well. Hands shoved in pockets on a recent morning. Oh, how many times do we see Bob there with the hands in his pockets, talking like totally relaxed? Hands shoved in pockets on a recent morning. He talked basketball with a cluster of jockey agents and horse owners before shuffling on toward the 8th pole to watch his horses work. Once there, Baffert lifted his binoculars to study his light brigade like a jeweler sizing up uncut gems. And you wonder why this guy wins, right? The horses in the Baffert barn are the most expensive in Southern California, if not the world. One of the owners he works for, Amar Zidan, paid $3.55 million at auction for a colt named Hajazi and $2.3 million for another, Arabian Night. We just saw Arabian Night finish second last weekend in the Lexington. If the name sounds familiar, it should. Zidan, a Saudi venture capitalist, owned Medina Spirit, who won the 2021 Kentucky Derby until he didn't. The colt tested positive for a prohibited drug on race day and had his victory rescinded. But then Bob was suspended for 90 days by Kentucky regulators and barred by Churchill Downs, the host of the Derby, from saddling horses in the race in 2022 and 2023. Was that fair? Maryland and New York regulators honored the ban, so Baffert also missed the other two legs of the 2022 Triple Crown, the Belmont and Preakness. Okay, so the other tracks followed suit. The affair further damaged a perpetually troubled sport, resurrecting concerns about doping scandals, the frequent and mysterious death of its horses. Medina Spirit died suddenly in 2021 while training, and waning interest in racing. After initially blaming a cancel culture for his shunning, Baffert vigorously proclaimed his innocence and has unsuccessfully tried to get his punishments overturned in courthouses and committee hearing rooms all the way from Kentucky to New York. Cancel culture, yeah. They even did a skit on Saturday Night Live about that, Bob Baffert, after the suspension in Medina Spirit. One place he was clearly not canceled was Southern California. In 2022, Baffert's stable won all but a handful of its 75 races at Santa Anita, Del Mar, and Los Alamitos, amassing more than $9.7 million in purse earnings to finish 12th in the national trainer standings, according to Equibase, despite Baffert missing 3 months while serving his suspension. Just amazing. A toll on his reputation. On a recent morning, a cheerful Baffert indicated that he wanted to turn the page and talk about his hopes of returning to the Triple Crown Trail at the Preakness in Baltimore in May. So Bob is planning to run in the Preakness this year, I imagine with Arabian Night. He had just returned from a 2-year-old training sale in Ocala, Florida, where Zidane spent $2 million for a colt, adding another high-profile prospect to the Baffert barn for the 2024 Kentucky Derby. So Bob is already looking ahead to the 2024 Derby. You know this guy is going to be going dead red to win the Triple Crown next year. Within an hour, however, his lawyer, Clark Brewster, said Baffert would agree to an interview, but only if it's centered on a 15-slide PowerPoint presentation of legal arguments that he said showed Baffert had not broken the rules and should not have lost his 2021 Derby winner, Medina Spirit. So Bob's still trying to get Medina Spirit up there in the winner's circle, back in the winner's circle. In affidavits, Baffert has said that by barring him from the Derby and any other racetrack it owns, Churchill Downs would effectively put him out of business. Well, I don't agree with that. Put him out of business. The guy is still going strong, even if he's missing these Triple Crown races. That has not happened because whatever his missteps, horse owners continue to trust him with their investments, and their confidence in him keeps paying off. So the owners, they don't care about the suspension. They're spending a fortune on these horses, and they want to put them in the best hands possible, and they figure it's Bob. The horse owners Baffert works with buy the best bred and most athletic colts at the auction, then turn them over to him in the hopes of winning the American Classics, the Derby, Preakness, and Belmont Stakes, which, along with the Breeders' Cup races, enhance a horse's value as a stallion prospect. Sure. That's where the money really is, once the stallion go out there as a stallion. Baffert has trained 16 Classic winners, 18 Breeders' Cup champions, and 2 colts, American Pharoah 2015 and Justify 2018, Team Justify. That swept the Triple Crown. The Irish-owned Coolmere breeding concern bought American Pharoah for $30 million and Justify, get this, Justify for $60 million. Justify has turned out to be a terrific stallion. His offspring now are really lighting him up. But I can't believe Justify went for twice what American Pharoah went for. And Justify retired undefeated. Baffert has been effusive about his love for the Derby, approaching it with the same intensity with which Steve Kerr and Bill Belichick chase NBA and NFL championships. His 6 official Derby victories tie Ben Jones, who captured his between 1938 and 1952 for the most by a trainer. So Bob Baffert is the modern day champion. Think about it. Ben Jones, this happened. He got his last Derby winner in 1952. That's 71 years ago. And no one has captured 6 since Bob came around. In February, court proceedings to have the Churchill Downs ban lifted, Bob was asked how many times he had won America's most famous race. 7, he replied, still counting Medina Spirit's erased victory. Bob said, I broke the record. I'm very proud of that. So Bob Baffert still considers Medina Spirit's victory at the initial victory anyway, at the Kentucky Derby, a victory. And he, in his mind, Bob says says it flat out. I broke the record. I'm very proud of that. Look at that. Talk about mental focus. Bob. Baffert was a quarter horse trainer in the late 80s when Mike Pegram, a longtime horse owner, urged him to switch to thoroughbreds. By 1998, the pair had won the Derby, the Preakness, and then missed the Triple Crown by a diminishing nose in the Belmont with a colt named Real Quiet. Both had found the stage they wanted to play on. Pegram said that the stress of Medina Spirit's failed drug test and its aftermath may not be reflected in the performances of Baffert's horses or in the prices his owners pay at auction, but it has taken its toll on Baffert and his reputation. The numbers are the numbers, and they show Bob's the best there is, Pegram said. But if someone attacks you personally, it hurts. Everybody handles it differently. Bob's a big boy and is moving on. Maybe so, but Baffert continues to fight to overturn the disqualification of Medina Spirit. His own suspensions in Kentucky and New York, and his prohibition from Churchill Downs' own tracks. He has said that the substance detected in Medina's blood, beta-mainthasone, a corticosteroid injected into joints to reduce pain and swelling, came from an ointment rather than an injection. I didn't realize that Bob Baffert is still fighting to overturn the Medina Spirit disqualification. So that's ongoing now. So we may want to keep an eye on that. Lawyers for state regulators in Churchill Downs counter that the drug is prohibited in any amount on race day and point to 9 positive drug tests Baffert's horses amassed from 2016 to 2020 to argue that his participation is detrimental to horse racing. They've hurt my reputation, Baffert testified in federal court in February. My horses should have made much more money. I didn't run for 90 days, and I had to let people go. Shortly after the ban was imposed, Baffert handed off most of his Derby contenders to other trainers, mainly the former assistant Tim Yaktine, so they could earn points to qualify for the Derby in the final prep races. Last year, Yaktine saddled Baffert's Taba and Messier for Baffert and watched them finish 12th and 15th. You got to wonder how they would have done if Bob was there. Pegram left his horses in Baffert's barn, effectively opting out of the Derby. One of them, Cave Rock, finished second in the 2022 Breeders' Cup Juvenile to Forte, the 2-year-old champion and current favorite to win the Derby. Cave Rock is among the horses Baffert is considering taking to Baltimore for this year's Preakness. So Bob plans on being at the Preakness, folks. I haven't heard anything about Bob Baffert in the Belmont Stakes, but we'll see. Bob's got character, and I hope I got some character too, Pegram said. Now, Pegram said, screw it. I'm not going to be in the Derby. I'm keeping my horses with Bob. I don't want to go anywhere else. Let's take care of the Preakness. I don't want Bob. I want my horse with Bob. I don't want him transferring him anywhere. So Pegram said, Bob's got character, and I hope I got some character too. Dominating in California. California has been good for Baffert, but it is not clear that he has been good for horse racing in the state. The sport was badly rocked in 2019 after 30 horses died at Santa Anita in a span of 6 months, national news that earned the scrutiny of California lawmakers and animal rights activists. So 30 horses died at Santa Anita in a span of 6 months. Now, I wonder how many were with Bob and what was the deal. Somebody was saying one time that Bob Baffert, he's responsible for a lot of deaths of horses. He had the highest death rate among horses in training or horse, whatever. And I did look that up, and it turned out it to be he didn't have the highest rate. It was just like 0.1% above the average, somewhere around there. And it amounted to I think it was 1 horse per 1,000 or something. Less than it was just a fraction. So it was a silly argument, but it's very rare that this happened. And you figure 30 horses died over 6 months is terrible, but 30 in 6 months out of how many and with who and under what circumstances? But they mentioned that there. That's what animal rights activists are talking about. In response, state and racing officials strengthened regulations around the use of riding crops, medication for horses, education for trainers and jockeys, track safety, and recuperation policies for injured horses. Last year, 12 horses died at Santa Anita, and thoroughbred fatalities through California fell 54% from 144 in 2019 to 66 for the last fiscal year. Okay, so it is dropping a little bit, just over half, 66 for the year. Even so, Baffert's Derby disqualification and the death of Medina Spirit kept horse racing in an unflattering light in a state where animal rights groups have a very powerful voice. Baffert's upcoming return to Triple Crown races coincides with stricter drug rules going into effect. Now, none of Bob's horses have tested positive for anything since his suspension last year went into effect. They will be administered by the newly minted Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority, which appears to have survived court challenges by racing industry groups. Drug testing now will be centralized, fast, and efficient. That was not the case when Medina Spirit failed his post-race drug test. If the new rules had been in place then, Medina Spirit might have been kept out of the Derby starting gate because Baffert would have been serving at least a 180-day suspension, most likely more, for previous infractions according to the baseline rules. Fair enough. Within the horse racing community, Baffert's dominance in California is acutely felt among fellow trainers and owners. 14 of the 16 horses nominated for the $200,000 Robert B. Lewis Stakes. Now listen to this. 14 of the 16 horses nominated, 14 out of 16 nominated for the $200,000 Robert B. Lewis Stakes, an important race on the Derby to the road to the Derby, were trained by Baffert. 14 of the 16 nominated for that for the Lewis Stakes were trained by Baffert. Together, his owners had paid $9.1 million for them. 14 horses, $9.1 million. Think about that. That's averaging over $500,000 per horse, even more. On race day, only 4 horses made it to the starting gate, and Baffert trained all 4 of them. Bettors were apoplectic, and regulators concerned that a single trainer could control the outcome of the race. That's crazy. Scott Chaney, the executive director of the California Horse, 4 entries made it to the starting gate, and all trained by the same guy. Okay. Scott Chaney, the executive director of the California Horse Racing Board, said officials warned the jockeys against working together. So they even go and warn the jockey, listen, guys, we don't want even a hint of colluding with each other, because that's where it is a regulatory issue, Chaney said in an interview. The competitive imbalance has made for a tense dynamic on the backside at Santa Anita and Del Mar, the premier track outside San Diego. Some owners have decided that if they can't beat Baffert, they might as well join him and have given him more horses for his already loaded barn. Fellow trainers grumbled, but declined to go on record so as not to look envious. I think envy does have a lot to do with this. Everyone, and some get envious of others when they're the best, No knock on Bob. He's got a powerful brand, a good team, and he delivers, said Bill Nader, president and chief executive of the Thoroughbred Owners of California. I think the frustration among trainers is, why not me? It is a fair question. There's no shortage of alternatives. We have Hall of Famers, big outfits, and up-and-comers that are all excellent trainers and have won big races. Sure, look at the big names out there, around the country. Pletcher, you got other big trainers, but the owners, they want to put these horses with Bob. There is a frequent lament among horse players that underlines the quixotic nature of a horse race. Nobody knows nothing. Horses are expensive. Breeding means nothing unless a horse can run fast. Between injuries and poor performances, Baffert's multi-million-dollar thundering herd has been winning to just one Derby qualifier. Baffert's multi-million-dollar thundering herd has been winnowed to just one Derby qualifier. Reincarnate, handled by Yacton. Whittled down to one because of this. And the Derby is anyone's race. Ask Eric Reed and Sonny Leon, the trainer and jockey of Rich Strike, last year's 80-1 winner. You want a good bet? Baffert will saddle a colt in Baltimore at the Preakness, ending his Triple Crown exile and taking his place back on horse racing's center stage. Joe Drape has been writing about the intersection of sports, culture, and money since coming to the Times in 1998. He has also pursued these lines of reporting as the author of 2 best-selling books. All right. What do you think after hearing this, hearing that article? Is Bob Baffert good for horse racing? The owners keep sending him the horses. Now, is Bob Baffert bad for horse racing? I put the poll out there, and I'll put a link to the poll down below. So I appreciate it if you weigh in. Oh, maybe you appreciate it if you weigh in. Make your voice heard in a simple vote. Is Bob Baffert bad for horse racing? You have 3 options: yes, no, and undecided. And I said opinions vary on this. And sometimes you hear the staunch naysayers that can't stand Bob. They're the ones that usually speak out, and more so. But so far, the early results of the polls show that the vote is fairly one-sided. And again, I pose the question, is Bob Baffert bad for horse racing? 67% so far have said no. Only 21% have said yes. So it's more than 3-1 that favor Bob Baffert. They don't think he's bad for horse racing. And a small percentage, the rest, some are undecided, but 61% believe Bob Baffert isn't bad for horse racing. What do you think? What's my opinion? I vote no. I want to see Bob there. I see Bob, as an ambassador for the sport. It brings a lot of horse racing fans joy when they see him there. He's a staple at the big events. Not going to be there. He wasn't there last year. It wasn't the same. He's not going to be there this year. But there's anticipation already looking to next year when Bob is eligible to return to the Kentucky Derby. And already Bob fans are salivating or just can't wait for the Preakness, where Bob is going to make his return to Pimlico. Unless something happens and one of his horses can't run. But otherwise, you expect to see Bob there in all of his glory.